Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode. And today we have a slightly more technical episode. We have Sayak Pal from Huggingface. Sayak, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Varun.
What we usually do here is like whenever we have somebody from outside, we're always like introduce yourself. Introduce yourself in a way that you would want the world to know you.
Yeah, for sure. Hi, folks. I'm Shayok. I'm flying all the way from Kolkata today. I work at an interesting company called Huggingface. There's actually an emoji in the company name. That's why I find it to be very interesting. I work as a machine learning engineer there, and don't let that term fear you off. It's just like regular software engineering, but I get to deal with a lot more exciting stuff. Maybe like the stuff that lets you generate images from natural language text description and so on. So yeah, that's like my job. That's what I get paid for. And off the work, I like to talk about cricket, cool Netflix movies, and so on. Big time into cricket, so can talk about cricket.
So yesterday's match was awesome.
It was a heart heavy matter.
So let's start with diffusers, right? So for people who don't know, Shaq maintains a repository called diffusers. My first interaction with diffusers was when I was trying out CompViz on diffusers. I would love to know how you even got into Hugging Face. Why did you get started with diffusers?
Oh, I think it has been a long journey, because I like to call it a long journey because, well, it's been a little more than 6 years. I'm into software engineering now. And for me, I should start with how I got into machine learning in the first place. For me, it started around in late 2015. I was in my undergrads during that point, and I was asked to choose an elective for my undergrad curriculum, and I ended up taking pattern recognition and machine learning. It was like late 2015. ResNets were just becoming a thing, and I ended up taking it. And the more I studied it, the more I got interested, because I've been a computer science nerd since my childhood. I was intrigued by the idea that we now have machines that can beat Turing test. So that was pretty fascinating to me. And from there on, I was like, okay, it's going to be either machine learning or nothing at all, because I have not actually dabbled in other areas of things like web development, blockchain, Android development, internet security, cyber security, and so on. Machine learning is that one thing that I like to say I have dabbled. I'm still dabbling. So from there on it started, and then I had to take up a job at TCS Research, which did not include a whole lot of machine learning, but I had to take it anyway. Finances, just got out of teenage at that point in time, so I had to keep my pockets filled. But soon I realized, no, this is not happening. I'm unable to make any progress. My mind is not being taken further. I'm not finding the job exciting enough. So I ended up quitting my job, and I then decided, okay, let's study things from the scratch. Let's see where it takes me. And then after like 6-7 months, I was fortunate enough to make my mark at a startup out of Pennsylvania. There I was introduced to computer vision, and from there on it sort of stayed. I've been fortunate enough to work on different facets of machine learning, computer vision, language modeling, machine learning, engineering, MLOps, and such.
And you're working on GANs then, right?
Yeah. So at my first truly ML focused job, I got to work with GANs quite a bit. And then I joined an Australian e-commerce company where I got to work with medium scale language models. And then Hugging Face happened. So it was interesting. Back then, Hugging Face is, for the folks that do not know, it's known for a very unique Python library called Transformers, not the architecture Transformers, the library Transformers. So Transformers it's primarily maintained at Hugging Face. And back then it was expanding its efforts for also supporting computer vision, because by 2021 Transformers had already become the go-to library for doing natural language processing, let's just face it. So in 2022 it thought of sort of expanding its efforts for computer vision and other modalities as well, such as speech. And someone from Huggingface reached out to me asking, hey, would you be interested in contributing some of the computer vision models to transformers? I was like, yeah, I was already contributing to open source, like different repositories like Keras and so on. And I was like, yeah, okay, transformers. I had already used transformers in my work at that Australian startup. I was like, okay, it's a library that I get to use heavily at my work, so why not contribute? So I started contributing to transformers, the computer vision models, and after like 3-4 months, I really started enjoying the process. And then after like 5-6 months of contributions, I was like, okay, let's reach out to the folks and let's see if I have a chance. They agreed and they had the interview process, and fortunately, I got in. And then when I joined Hugging Face, I was a developer advocate engineer. I was doing computer vision. I was leading a couple of computer vision advocacy engineering efforts at Hugging Face. And then soon I discovered from my computer vision friends that GANs are probably going to be dead in the next 2-3 months. And I should really catch up with diffusion models. And fortunately enough, by that point in time, Hugging Face already had diffusers, a library purely dedicated for tinkering with diffusion models.
What I'd heard during that period, when GANs had started to fade out from popularity, is that hey, diffusers are good, but they're very slow. They use something called Markov chains. Like people are like, this is too slow. But then when people start seeing the outputs, and then DALI and all came out, we were all like, wow.
Yeah. So that's what kind of happened. That's what got me interested in studying the subject in the first place. And I was like, okay, we have a code base already, and let's do the code first, because I'm one of the students of CS 231N, that popular course from Stanford taught by Justin Johnson, Andre Karpathy, and Fei Fei Li, the 2016 edition. And they were always showing the Python pseudo. So I was like, okay, let's get into the code first and let's see, like hacking things. So from the code, I got to learn quite a bit, and I started tinkering with the process. I started internally contributing to the diffusers code base. So basically, long story cut short, I was trying to make my case because I started really loving the literature in general.
And which part did you start off with? You started off with the pipelines. You started off with the scheduler. You started off with the
I
models?
started off with the training scripts directly.
Oh, interesting.
Like but at that point in time, Dream Booth was becoming a thing.
Yeah.
And I was interested to
all your Lensa and all.
Yeah.
Lensa uses Dreamboot behind the scenes.
Yeah. So I was pretty intrigued by the idea, like subject-driven generation of this quality. My God, what is this?
Yeah.
Even StyleGAN couldn't generate you something like that. So I was like, okay, let's study these things. And I was like, okay, probably this is going to be my thing for the next 2-3 years. And I started internally making my case for it. And then I reached out to my team lead saying, hey, could I work on this full time? Even internally, I had to sort of talk to a couple of people, and then seeing my case, seeing my internal contributions, they were like, okay, come work.
Interesting. What's your favorite thing about maintaining diffusers?
Well, it's such a new literature. You get to know about a lot of things just from a GitHub pull request. Like someone will open up a PR and you
for animate diff and stuff. You'll be like, what is animate diff?
What the F is that? I mean, even to review that pull request, I need to read a whole paper.
Yeah.
I'm like, what am I doing? Am I a researcher? Am I an engineer? Am I a maintainer? What am I truly?
Yeah.
So that's one of the most exciting parts that I really get to enjoy on a day-to-day basis. Like, there are so many clever and intelligent contributors, but at the same time, they're very kind.
Yeah.
So I'm like, my humility is already checked.
Yeah. Can I ask you a question? I think, and now let's like make it a little simpler for like, let's say the young kids watching this, right? A lot of people send me DMs saying, I want to get into AI, right? And it's almost like AI is such a catch-all buzzword, right? My understanding of this space is you got researchers, you have people who work at the ML level, and then you have people who work at the applied AI level. Like we are very clear we work at the applied AI level, right? I don't think we have the competency to work at the research level. I would like to know if you feel these are the same 4 divisions, or you feel like, it's a little more expanded than this. Also, what do you think is the path for each of these people?
I think to be able to answer that question, I'll have to set the context a bit clearer. I'll have to discuss what I get to do, where my intersections sort of lie, and then probably I'll build things from there. So I get to, fortunately enough, at a company like Huggingface, there's no like scarcity of exciting things. If if the company as a whole feels like, okay, there's that thing which potentially could make a lot of impact, because we optimize for actions over rather than trying to be perfect, we see impact like as a first class citizen. We probably won't be doing anything that probably won't lead to impacts like obscure novel things and stuff like that. So we like to work on things that become generally useful to people, like diffusers. Like
Yeah.
it becomes useful to an artist, it becomes useful to an engineer, it becomes useful to a software engineer or probably a company. That those are the kinds of things that we get to work on. So most of it involves engineering, but also little part of it involves applied research. So fortunately enough, I get to work on both sides. Like as I mentioned, like for reviewing a pull request, I get to probably read an entire paper. And
So what you're saying is it's never clean. Like
yeah,
even in our experience, right? Like when we let's say fine tune a model, we are screwing with the hyperparameters.
Yeah.
So in a way, we're doing a very little amount of ML.
Yeah.
So it's never clean whether you're doing applied AI or ML. Pretty much, like I would say, somebody maintaining diffusers will be pretty much exactly in the center.
Yeah, exactly in the center. That's because the way the literature is moving towards. Let's say, so I'll give you a concrete example, right? For the most part, for maintaining diffusers, I think engineering level knowledge is okay, is enough.
You mean just a software engineer can maintain diffusers?
Good Python knowledge, good software engineering knowledge, and of course,
Doesn't need to be an AI guy.
a good level of ML knowledge. That's like the so two primary things: software engineering and ML.
Got
It's not like if you do not know anything about diffusion models,
Yeah, it's not
you
gonna
will
work.
be able to navigate throughout the maintenance process. It should be 50% diffusion models. It should be 50% about the code design and stuff like that.
Got
At
it.
least that's how I like to differentiate between things. It could be 70-30 split as well.
Got it.
But for me, it's like 50-50. You
And what
need
about
to know-
research?
Yeah. So coming to that point, so when Stable Diffusion XL came out, I think Huggingface was the first one to have put together control nets models,
Yeah.
especially fine-tuned on Stable Diffusion XL checkpoints.
Yeah.
And then we also released, in collaboration with the Tencent folks, G2I adapters. Then we also released an impending checkpoint. So for doing those kinds of large-scale, generally useful training runs, you need to have a mindset for tinkering with things. You need to have some sort of an information driven approach. Let's say you have studied all the papers, okay, probably if I combine this trick with this one, probably this will lead to something.
I think as the maintainer, you also have to think about popularity, right? If you know something's becoming popular, like Koya, if I remember,
Yeah.
it's getting popular. Like, hey, we need to put diffusers in this. So you also need to know the general landscape.
Yeah.
In
I need to be able to predict trends. Like for example, what happens if videos become popular in 2024? Do I have enough good of an API design to support that? How quickly I can navigate through it? That sort of stuff.
Interesting. What's the career path? Like, let's start with researcher. What's the career path to being a researcher?
Be really good at math, especially calculus, linear algebra, probability. If you
And where should you study? Like, what should you do? Like, I'm 18 years old. How do I become a researcher?
For sure, if you have taken science, if you have maths in your like PCMB collection, I think you should really consider taking high school math seriously, because I'll tell you frankly, in my 11th and 12th, I had PCMC, physics, chemistry, mathematics, and computer science. And mathematics was that one subject I was probably a bit good at, and I would do maths like all day. And I didn't know I was gonna study machine learning, and I'm still ripping out the benefits because I in my head I can visualize the gradient back propagation chain. So if you are 18 and if you are trying to be an ML researcher, take your high school math very seriously.
Got it. How do you get into being in ML? Let's assume your math isn't great. Then how do you enter ML?
Still, I mean, there are still paths possible for you. For example, maybe start with Andrew Yang specialization, deep learning specialization. And if you feel like, okay, ML is your thing, ML is something that gets you interested and excited, you will probably end up studying maths anyway. So it's like if you truly love something, you will
get better at it. And applied AI is, I mean, at least for me, we study computer science for 4 years.
Yep.
Work in software for a while.
Yeah.
That's the path you would assume for applied AI?
For applied AI, still having machine learning knowledge, I think, is necessary, because if you do not know what regularization is, what generalization is, okay, if I bump up the learning rate, it's probably gonna overfit too quickly. If you do not know about these things, you will anyway lead to failure. So having a bit of machine learning knowledge is anyway needed.
I feel like if you're interested in AI, you learn that on the job. I'll give you an example, right? When we first started using Dream Booth, the Dream Booth trainer on automatic 1111 at that point had all the hyperparameters. It had the learning rate. You would have to set in, like, if you ever watch a tutorial on Dream Booth, you'll see this, right? You'll be like, hey, first prepare the regularization images, and then they'll send you to like a GitHub repository, like 1,000 images of like people,
Yeah.
and they'll be like, these are regularization images. Then, here's the learning rate. Do you want to use FP60, FP16, or do you want to use BF? So it's like in the beginning when I first saw that UI, it was very confusing, right? It's like, what am I doing? But I feel like if you have a reasonably fast GPU and you just try all sorts of combinations, just see the output, I think eventually you start learning what the right.
There are trade-offs. No, you had the GPUs.
Yeah.
And even so you had a good user experience, let me just say it.
Yeah.
You had a good user experience when you were learning about things, but most folks might
Don't
not have that.
that.
Students only have access to a T4 GPU instance. That's what free collab instances give you, right? And with T4, it can be notoriously hard to navigate.
So you're saying that learning by just tweaking all the parameters many times, like I feel this with deepfakes, right? Like there's a tool chain for deepfakes called Deepface Lab.
Yeah.
Have you heard of it?
Yeah,
Deepface Lab. So every time I've used Deepface Lab, now like I know instinctively if I add a little bit of random warp, are the outputs going to be better? It's very instinctive. I don't think there's any article about Deepface Lab on the internet saying these are the best parameters. I don't think there's anything such as best. Right?
Exactly.
Like what's the kind of, like, for example, one of the things I feel is that, so we did this swap of Shah Rukh, right, in one of our videos. And when we were doing the swap of Shah Rukh, we were like, hey, the skin tone of Shah Rukh doesn't match Walter White. We were putting it on Walter White. The skin tone of Shah Rukh doesn't match Walter White. And then we played with the parameters enough such that, we got that output. So if you ever to do it again, I kind of know what the settings are.
Exactly.
Right? So for us, it's been a little more like instinctive.
As they say, deep learning is more alchemy than science. So it's still an evidence-driven branch of science, but it's like writing an essay. If you know your vocabulary right, you have got lots of options.
And you'll see this on Reddit, right? Like, this is the best thing on Reddit. Like, Reddit, it's like every day on SD, especially the Dream Booth parts, people...
r/stable diffusion, that channel.
Everybody... every day there's one person saying what's the best learning rate for Dream Booth, and nobody knows. People like try this, then try this, then try this.
No. It varies from subject to subject.
Yeah. So we learned instinctively. Is there a way to learn it non-instinctively? Is there like documentation on it? Because I remember reading the Fast AI book. There's that Fast AI that starter to this thing. In that, even they are like, learning rate, bro, it's random. It's like they're like, there's no science to this. So is the only way to learn it instinctively?
So I'll tell you what. For problems like Dream Booth, for problems like control net training, or for problems like stable diffusion training, there are recommendations that you can refer from. Like, you study the stable diffusion technical report, you study their technical implementation details section, and you study the learning rate. You start from there, and then you sort of start to anneal it. Maybe drop it down 10x, and then you probably use a scheduler, and then you get to where you want to be. But for simpler problems like image classification, there's already things like LR Finder, which the fast book discusses about.
Yeah, the LR
you
Finder.
Do the LR Finder, you find the range, and then you do cyclical LR, and then you get away with it. So you got to study certain things because you studied the fast book. That's how you got to know, okay, this is completely random.
But I didn't really understand the fast book the first time. Like, I understood a little bit, but I didn't understand it well enough till on Dream Booth, it's almost like you have the exact same hyperparameters and you're like tweaking around. I feel like maybe it's just me, but I understand better by like fucking around, like trying 20 things and be like, what's the output like? Like, we're working on that. So when Sayak first came here, we're working on an anime right now, and it's like even from here, can you hear the GPUs crying? The UPS is crying, right? So for us, it took me 2 weeks to get the right settings, and I can't explain how I got to those right settings.
Yeah,
like, it's just, I tried everything.
I gotta say, it also depends on one's perspectives. If you are a tinkerer by heart, okay, you have the resources available to you.
You have time.
You have time, and you are putting all your resources to good use. But many folks might not have the resources, but many folks also may not know how to make the appropriate use of your time or your resources. Or many folks are probably a bit more scientifically curious. They want to figure out the science. I
Hmm.
think it's okay.
Yeah.
It depends on one's perspectives. But if you want to become a true tinkerer, you better start investing time in tinkering things.
Tinkering, yeah. I feel that's a DNA thing. Like either you're a tinkerer
Yeah.
from when you were like 10,
Or
15
you are
years
a
old.
theoretist.
I have a wild question here. It's going to be a little bit, it's an observation I've made, and it's an observation we spoke about before we got on this podcast as well. Do you feel like a lot of, at least some of the ML parts now are going to be completely UI driven, like with Gradio and stuff? Because Dream Booth, sure, you can train it directly from whatever. You open a prompt and you're training it directly from terminal, or you have one of these tools like Automatic 1111 where the UI is ready for you. All the parameters are there, and you don't really need to know how to code per se. Do you feel like that's a phenomenon that's coming out?
Depends on the user persona, I would say. Let's say if you are working on a component that's going to be integrated into a bigger component, probably you would want to version control that component. You would
Got it.
probably want to do unit testing.
Got it.
You would probably want to have some trust and reliability for your end users, and for that you can't probably rely on no code or UI solutions. But probably you are an artist or you are a tinkerer and you are just looking for ready-made solutions, and there's nothing wrong with that. You go ahead and do automatic mono. In fact, lots of artists in fact from India, they use that tool. So I think
Interesting.
it depends on the user persona.
Got it. Awesome. So let's broaden out a little bit, right? I think the path for all these people we figured out. What is the path for somebody who doesn't know anything about AI and just wants to get up to date?
Follow Twitter, 1.
Yeah.
2, follow Twitter. 3rd, follow Twitter. And follow someone called AK, because
He puts out the papers.
and he also happens to be my colleague. I get to fret about that, but AK is my colleague at Huggingface. So, but anyway, jokes apart, AK has this uncanny ability to cut through the noise and only tweet about the papers that are probably going to be the most impactful.
Absolutely.
Follow that guy and be done.
Every
with
time
it.
AK puts out a paper, we'll if there's a code base associated, we'll go play with it. It's
Absolutely.
Like, it's amazing. Yeah. Okay, so now I want to ask you, right? What's the common person think about all this? Like I'm sure you've spoken to common people, right? It's moving really fast. Like one thing that scares me a little bit is that this is all moving too fast, right? We had a period where stable diffusion outputs were garbage, right? When we fine-tuned the stable diffusion model for Alpha CTR, which is many months ago, it was kind of hard. Today it's one click. Today Civit AI has like thousands of models that you can just download, right? So I'm kind of feeling like, what's the alpha? Like,
I think 2024 is going to be about videos.
yeah,
We have had a lot of models around 2D text to image stuff.
yeah.
Now it's the time for text to video.
I'm also
It's
really excited
going to
about
get
3D.
better. Yeah,
I think
3D motion, view synthesis,
the entire Gaussian splatting.
Gaussian splatting, that sort of stuff. Like the general workflow could be generate a 2D image, use Gaussian splatting to synthesize 3D views, and from the 3D views generate whatever you want to do. So I think the next part would be to control these things. Like let's say you have this prompt saying a dog and a cat. Now, how do you put the emphasis more on the cat? I know that there's something called prompt weighting that forces the generation process to focus more on the cat, but does that also make sure that the dog does not get neglected?
You know what we do now, especially in video, especially for frames where there are two characters, we roto it out. We use SAM, segment anything, and we're just like, this character treated separately, this character treated separately. Dude, so I used to use Automatic 111 for a long time. Now I've moved to Comfy because Comfy just has such granular level of control that you can just be like, hey, I only want to work on, like, you can have a very, very specific workflow, complicated as it is, but you can let your scatter brain just, kind of appear on screen through the nodes, right? But my question was different. My question was, what should the common person think about this? Like, this is all moving so fast. Like, a lot of people in jobs are like, dude, this is just 6 months ago, this was something else. And now it's like, I'm in this place of like, kind of like fear. Is my job going to continue? Like, how should they think?
It's a difficult question. For someone that does not work on artificial intelligence and probably they work on regular software engineering, I think it kind of depends on the domain they are working on. And if they are not keeping an open mind, and if they are not thinking about the use cases which might be benefited by using different AI tools, I think it's going to be a bit different for them, because you never know which industry is gonna get affected. Because one day if OpenAI or any other big player comes up with a particular niche AI tool which probably affects their industry.
They're doing something for developers. They have a
Yeah,
developer
yeah,
conference next
exactly.
month.
So you never know what's gonna happen. So I think having an open mind, like
Isn't that scary for the average person? Because imagine you're 19 years old, or maybe you're 21 years old, you just got done with 4 years of computer science engineering. Or not even computer science. Let's say just
any domain.
let's say BBA or something. And just looking at all this tech go by, and you're not sitting on the tech every day, right? So you have no idea. Like until we put out that, and I put out a teaser on Twitter of us doing the anime thing. Until then, people didn't even know it was possible, right? But now a lot more people will work on it. In the next 6 months, you'll have everyone creating anime, and it'll reach those people 6 months later. So the question is, how are they supposed to think about it? Like, what are they supposed to do? There's so much fear. You know what? I'm scared.
Yeah, I won't say I'm not scared, but I'm scared as well. I think there's two sides to this. Of course, there are scary bits, but there are, of course, ways for you to think out of the box, right? Because you knew that there wasn't something that could do animations as you are currently doing. You took that as an opportunity to actually turn that into a reality, right?
So you're saying you need a domain, and then you can use AI in that domain to be the best in the domain. Is that what you're saying? Like if I'm a salesperson, let's say.
Definitely one. You can at least have the freedom in your thought process, right? If you think like in your industry, AI is not getting used as it should be used, you could probably talk to people.
But that's confusing for software engineers, no? Because their domain is, I mean, they haven't worked. I mean, let's say they're probably going to work in their first company a few years later, right? Then they've not chosen their specific domain yet, fintech or AR or whatever domain they choose. So they just think it's all about software engineering. What should a person like that think, where they haven't picked a domain yet?
I think I'll give you my true stance. For large scale systems, for search systems, I don't think AI written code is going to be reliable. For that, you need truly good, well crafted, like well minded, well rounded engineers. So if they are approaching their field from an organic perspective, wanting to actually get better without getting mediocre thoughts in their way, I think that's going to be beneficial for them, because by doing so, they are not just having an open mind, but they are also eager enough to continue to get better at what they do. Because as I said, large scale engineering systems, they are probably not going to use AI for a foreseeable future.
Got it. But what about like an engineer working at a small company? Let's say you're working in some fintech and you're building the nth authentication system, which has already been like there's already, like in Ruby, we have these things called gems. It's already there. What do those people think?
Think about ways in which you could leverage artificial intelligence, as we talked about. The broader question here would be how you could make use of the AI tools to make the security systems even better.
Even better.
I just talked about security, and there are lots of things to dabble around in fintech, right? Like how could you handle transactions more efficiently? How could you recommend things better in the transactions world? So maybe just ask ChatGPT about the ideas, and let's try to gauge your skill sets to those ideas, and let's try to pick those ideas one by one, and let's maybe start from a POC, and then if there's enough consensus, scale it up.
Got it. And what do you think happens in 2-3 years? Like I'm a believer that not all of computer science engineering, but a good chunk of computer science engineering is going to be AI assisted. Like I saw this thing by builder.io 2-3 days ago, right? Where now you can just do Figma to code directly. And Figma could always do Figma to code directly, but this is different. It's like it's custom trained on Figma to code. It is, the outputs are great. They're responsive.
And they have also introduced something called edit instructions. You have the slides on Figma, and if you put edit instructions as constructs, they just edit it adhering to the edit instructions.
This is the builder.io folks. Yeah, so looking at all that, what should a software engineer think?
It's actually the software engineers that are shipping these features, right?
Correct. But what should the other software because there's a stat recently, okay? Only 3% of software engineers are really employable. I think 50% or something of software engineers graduating out of engineering college in India today don't know how to use Git.
Yeah.
What happens to those people? What should they be thinking?
If you are asking me for my honest opinion, then
be honest. It's fine. I mean, I think
they need to buckle up. They need to start investing time in learning more things, like ensuring when you are graduating, you at least know how to make use of Git. You at least know about the fundamentals of software engineering, code design pattern,
Oops.
stuff like that. I mean, I do not have to invest time to teaching you, hey, how you should implement or how you should even Dockerize your web application. And it's all free tools. And if you even put 1 week, it should be fairly easy for you to pick up.
Yeah.
So don't look all surprised when I ask you to containerize that web application of yours and scale it with Kubernetes.
What about people outside of computer science? What should
Yeah.
my mom think?
Yeah. So the barrier to entry could depend on your maturity level, because Ian Lekan himself is coming from electrical engineering. He didn't study, well, study probably is a wrong word, but he, if for by the formal definition, he did not study computer science. At least that part I know. He comes
So you're
from the
talking about somebody? You're talking about a particular person?
Yeah, Ian Lekan.
Oh, Jan LeCun. Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so
The Meta AI guy.
chief scientist at Meta, the guy that popularized self-supervised learning, the guy who is believed to be the inventor of CNNs. So he comes from electrical engineering background. So I think in a way it kind of depends on your maturity level, your affinity towards, I don't know.
But India is very hard stuck with degrees, and India is very hard stuck with, oh, you did this for 2 years, so how can you do this other thing?
Yeah, so that happened to me as well.
Yeah?
At
Like,
TCS
what did people
research.
tell you?
You do not come from a tier 1 college, you do not get to do research.
Yeah. India is very gating like that.
Has happened with me too.
And I thought the younger generation would be different, but younger generation is all the same.
Yeah, but Varun, let me tell you, I get to interact with a lot of kids just coming out of the grad school. Even I had the opportunity to interact with some of the folks in some of the tier 1 institutions like IISc, IIT Guwahati and so on. Their mindset is changing.
Yeah.
They have started respecting the work that the engineers are putting up, the library maintainers or the folks that are at the forefront, but they actually do not take a look at their institutional affiliations
background
these
and
days.
whatnot.
They just take a look at their work these days. So I think the mindset of the kids are improving. I won't say the majority, but at least it's improving.
Interesting.
That's what makes me happy. Yeah.
So tell me, I'm personally a believer that open source will win this game. Okay, I'll tell you my thesis first. There's an open source repository called Wavetulip. You've heard of it, right?
Yeah.
So I used to use Wavetulip very often. We were just trying to automate my content because I'm quite lazy in that regard. And I remember the Wavetulip model is a low res model. It's 256. It's trained on 256 pixels images or whatever. So we reached out to the maintainers and we said, hey, can you send us the higher res ones? And they did. They sent us the higher res ones, but we still had problems with it. It's not perfect. 6 months later, HeyGen comes out, right? You've seen some of the HeyGen output, and HeyGen output is great. But I feel like now that HeyGen's come out, now a lot of other open source repositories are coming out that say, hey, we will do HeyGen, but whatever. You can do it by yourself locally. So I feel like everything that it's the cycle of open source will first prove that it's possible.
Yeah.
Okay, there'll be some kind of, it's not great, but it's a POC. Then some commercial entity will do it. Then open source gets back in the game and says, we're going to crush them.
Yeah.
I've seen this cycle like so many times now.
Yeah.
I personally believe that open source will win for this reason, right? Like Llama 2 today, it's like, sure.
Or even Mistral.
Right? Like, sure, GPT is great, but the amount of, like, even in stable diffusion, right? The amount of extras, add-ons, somebody modifying it in a specific way, like ControlNet. Midjourney doesn't have ControlNet. DALL-E doesn't have ControlNet. And it's not just ControlNet, right? If you've seen Automatic 111, it's like packed with hundreds of different things.
If you wanted to do, you can figure your way out.
Yeah, I think, in my opinion, Automatic 111 is the new Photoshop. Right? People don't realize that yet, but I think that's the new Photoshop. My question is, why is open source winning so hard? I know it's the law of numbers, right? You have more, individual contributors, so you win. But do you actually feel open source will win long term?
Yeah, I like to believe so. It's probably going to sound biased because I work at a company that kind of symbolizes open source and open access. But personally, I have been contributing to open source even before I joined Huggingface, as I mentioned. It was because of my open source contributions I was employed by the companies. So I do believe I am a disciple of open source. I'm a firm believer in doing things out in the wild. And the reason why I like to believe open source is going to stay, probably it's because it gives you possibilities, it gives you enablements. Because if, let's say, you have your open source model, you can go ahead and tweak it and build your own custom solutions. Let's say you have your model, but probably you are seeing opportunities around building a custom inference service.
Hmm.
Maybe it's open access, but probably if you wanted to commercialize it, you gotta pay.
Hmm.
That sort of stuff.
So Red Hat, the old school Red Hat model, if you're familiar.
Yeah.
But do you feel like it's wise or safe for us to be throwing around these extraordinarily powerful models on just over the open internet or on Pirate Bay or whatever?
Can you probe into a GPT-4 model? Can you evaluate
No.
your safety?
No, but I do know
safety
that
things.
I'll give you the flip side, the devil's side argument. I don't agree with this, but the devil's advocate argument to this is OpenAI is regulated. They're massive. They've raised money from investors. The government can always crack down on them if they're doing something shady. I don't know if some guy in, I don't know, Russia has downloaded this model, this open source Mistral model, and fine-tuned it to do something horrible. I have no idea. The government can't crack down on every single person.
As a consumer, I think you need to have some kind of awareness, and I think it also depends on how you are consuming that model. If you are consuming, let's say, horrible content, and if it's not leading to a particular national security cause or something, how is it actually harmful?
See, if you remember on diffusers,
Yeah.
You guys also do. I mean, I could theoretically get the protein structure of a medicine from diffuser. Like, I think you guys have some model on diffusers that allows you to do that, if I'm not wrong.
I think we have an example that shows you how to do molecule generation.
Molecule
but
generation.
Yeah.
So what if somebody creates a bioweapon? Maybe GPT-10, or not GPT-10, but let's say Llama 10, fine-tuned on some data set, is able to now synthesize dangerous chemicals. And by the way, I'm going slightly into conspiracy theory, crazy bullshit territory here, because some of the times, if you actually go through history, some of this has actually happened. And these are like the very edge cases. I'm not like fully sold on these cases, but I would like to know your thoughts.
Well, folks are going to have to step up. Folks, I'm sure if you are following the open source developments, it's like, okay, we have figured out vulnerabilities. We have found out, okay, this have problems, but we are also fixing it. And after like 2-3 months.
But open source,
okay,
you can't
it's
do that,
fixed.
no?
Why?
It's hard because somebody would have already, like, if there's a vulnerability, I would have one static set of weights on my computer. You've updated those weights, but I don't need them because I'm like, I know there's a vulnerability.
Yeah,
I'll
so
exploit
for
it.
the end consumer, you implement some sort of watermarking. That's how you get to know about, okay, I need to actually implement a watermarking system to validate, okay, my things are coming from a verified resource.
So everyone that's doing something open source, but then, the problem with watermarking is I've seen this with games, right? Every game eventually gets pirated. Eventually somebody's going to figure out.
Yeah. So for this continuous modalities of data, implementing a good way of watermarking is not particularly hard. It probably messes up with the quality, but I'm sure in 2024 you will see really good watermarking system. So even companies are doing
Especially
this
in
already.
video and all, it's easy to do.
Yeah, and companies are doing this already in order to validate, okay, if we generated that image for you, we know how do we know? Because it's already watermarked. It's invisibly watermarked.
What do you think about like front-end engineering? I'm talking about specifically people who are, because I think the most vocal computer science subset, or I would say software engineering subset, is people who are front-end engineers, right? They're using a framework like whatever, React and Svelte and whatnot. What should they think? Because I feel like that seems like there's a lot of disruption there.
Yeah, front-end engineering, it's all cool and wild. We have things like layout to HTML, code to HTML, and so on. But at the same time, one must also be aware of the fact that front-end engineers are also true and strong advocates of user experiences. And with artificially intelligent systems, I don't think it's possible to automatically bake in the user experience. Of course, you can learn from experience for sure, but by that point, front-end engineers will also try to figure out how to make use of AI honed tools in their work in the best possible manner.
I think the outputs will be much better. They'll be faster. I was asking more in the sense of jobs, because I don't think we can support. We are just churning out an insane amount of front-end engineers now. And I think eventually the front-end engineers who use AI will obviously be ahead of the front-end engineers who don't. But what happens to the rest?
I think the similar philosophy applies. If you are not stepping up in your game, if you are not buckling up, if you are not already identifying opportunities in which AI could benefit your entire journey, or not even AI, if you have figured out a particular difficult problem in your work that probably you have got enough clues about, take it away.
So which of the companies do you think is going to win? Google, Meta, Microsoft, or OpenAI. Technically, I see Microsoft and OpenAI in the same camp, but there seems to be some tension. But let's
Yeah.
say 4 companies. Or do you feel it's going to be
In
one of the
terms
new?
of,
In terms of who you think is going to win the cake, like who's going to build AGI? And obviously, you can also include the Anthropics of the world.
for
and
sure, for sure. Well, I'm not a firm believer of AGI. I won't like to see an AGI developed in front of my eyes because
Why?
I still like to play cricket and control stuff that I like to control.
But you
at
can
least.
still play cricket.
Yeah.
Like AGI is not going to stop you from playing
Yeah,
cricket.
yeah, for sure. Yeah, I mean, I would like to have artificial intelligent tools that make my life better on a daily basis. Like I have an agent that remembers things for me and tells me, "Hey, you should wake up because you are sitting for an hour or something." But for AGI, like folks that are going to the market for me to do my grocery, no, I'm not interested in those sorts of stuff because yeah, those are
But
like
it most likely will happen, right? I mean, it doesn't need to be AGI per se. Like, if you've seen Optimus, Tesla, and the Optimus robot that they're making, it seems like going and getting groceries and computer vision is good enough for it to pick out exactly which cornflakes you like,
for sure. But
pay.
is it good enough to navigate around complex conditions like we have in India or Bangalore?
No idea. But let's assume. Okay, let's take the hypothetical scenario where it's possible.
If you go via that route, I think Google will have the upper edge
Why?
because they have years and years of experience of really good engineering. Now they have teamed up with DeepMind, who has like immense cavalry of doing cutting edge and breakthrough research. Let's just face it.
And they have the hardware. They have
They have the
Android,
hardware, they have the
Chrome.
experience of building World Wide Web and so on. They have Jeff Dean, who was one of the co-inventors of MapReduce, best engineers in the world, best researchers in the world, and they know how to do hardware. Like TPUs, they invented their goddamn own chips.
Yeah.
So
I feel they'll win for a different reason. I feel they'll win because of distribution, right? They have Android. Apple's not great at. Apple's historically never done research well, right? The one place I saw Apple do research is with glucose monitors. They're doing something interesting, but it's like that's the only.
there's a niche.
Yeah.
But Google has like a
It's broad.
demonstrated history of doing research across broad disciplines in computer science.
Yeah, and I think on the web they have Chrome. I think Chrome is now the gateway to the web, and I think even though they missed out on a web on a desktop OS, they still have Chrome. Like whether you're on Linux, whether you're on Windows, you're still.
And most importantly, sorry I interrupted, data.
They know us all. They know us well. Yeah, I've invested quite a bit of money in Google because I'm just like, I personally think Google's going to win. It's not financial advice. I'm financially idiot. But I think Google will win for the same reasons that you think. What happens in a world where maybe we don't have these physical robots running around? Maybe it's all digital. Like you have agents sitting on the internet, either local or on the cloud. In that case, who wins? Still Google?
I like to think so.
Still Google.
Yeah.
Interesting. Have you invested?
Because internet.
Have you invested in Google?
I have not, because I am also a financial idiot. But Google is close to my heart because, as I mentioned, I have been a computer science nerd. I studied the MapReduce paper in my teenage. So I have the paper signed from Jeff Dean, actually. So thanks to one of my friends from South Korea, he got it signed. But my point is, I think they are like experts across broader disciplines of computer science, not just a particular niche. So they'll be able to keep their foot strong.
So I want to isolate applied AI for a second, right? So I don't know, people don't know this, we keep it under the radar, but we run this AI agency called Zenotech, where we build applied AI solutions for companies, usually media companies. What we do is we'll either build them, a fine-tuned model to write in their style, or we build like a fine-tuned image model, or we'll put things together, right? For example, the short GPT, if you remember the video clubbing, this thing, some companies will be like, hey, connect that to my repository. So we work at purely the applied AI layer, a little bit of fine-tuning. But I feel like today fine-tuning started to become one click.
Yeah.
So in my head, the concern that's going on every day is, at what point is the CEO of one of our clients going to wake up and just be like, I want my model to do this, and that gets baked out.
Baked out as in?
So for example, we have a client, I'm not going to take names, but we have a client who we have fine-tuned Mistral to write in Hindi, right? In their voice. They have a specific voice, the way the client writes. It's a media company. And the question I have for you is, at what point is technology going to be available where you can just one click I know we were talking about the auto training, right, where one click you're able to just put in your own data and you get your own custom model pressed out. When do the models start getting personalized for you without you needing an engineering bit in between?
I think it's a subjective question, because my answer to this question will be very similar to what I already answered before. If it depends on the persona, like it also depends on the kinds of problems the company is trying to solve for, because if you are working on solutions that are going to be integrated as a part of a bigger system, you would probably have to version control it. You will have to test it in isolation. You will have to do the unit testing parts, and for that matter, you probably can't be having things in a one click situation. But if you are looking for interfaces, like for building quick POCs, just to try to have an estimate around, okay, if it works, it works, we'll run a short pilot, or if it does not, we'll just kill it. For those particular use cases, I
Will
think
be automated. Will Gradio and
it's
all is
okay.
anyway there.
I think it's okay. But for doing things in a reliable way, for, let's say, for things like Photoshop, right, because it's a product at the end of the day, and we all know that there are diffusion models running inside that editor. If you want to develop at that scale, you will have to version control things. You will have to exactly know how to control these things and how to make them better, because if you upgrade Photoshop, probably you will end up having a better version of the model. But if you did not version control it, how come will you know? So you will have to test that in isolation. There will be separate teams testing that and shipping it to you, and the cycle will.
What we have started finding as a moat, at least on that business, is that I think it's purely about the data. Like if we can collect data in a way that even the companies don't know they have, which involves a lot of messy, like going deep sort of work into the company, finding out where it's hidden. I think that seems to be a moat because the companies are not going to do that themselves. They don't have the know-how of figuring out, well, I want to train this thing, and maybe it's one click to train this thing in some point in a year, 2 years. We believe it's going to be one click to train in a couple of years. Who's going to get you the data? Who's going to extract the right data? Who's going to do RLHF? So I feel in a way we thought, hey, we can run the company Zeno with like maybe 5-6 people. But now we've started finding we have a lot of data guys whose job is just to, pick out the right thing and also do RLHF, right? Like it's like, hey, okay, now the model's running. Let's see the outputs. Do we like it? Do we not like it?
You are recruiting human annotators to get their preference,
Yeah.
and you are fine tuning on the preference data.
Yeah, but I don't think we can do it synthetically because the problems. I mean, some of the things that some of these clients want are so specific.
Yeah,
I don't feel
you
GPT.
need human preference.
Yeah, you need human preference. You need to know, will Indians like it? So it's almost like from a hiring perspective, we have to hire obviously people who are diligent and smart and whatnot, but also people who have Indian cultural context.
Yeah, otherwise you probably won't be able to annotate those data and have the
Exactly.
preference data,
So-
because preference data will be your moat.
Yeah. So we started it thinking it'll be an AI company, it'll be an AI services company, but 90% of what we do today is data work. I mean, for us, we've started to feel like the moat is the data, like getting high quality data.
I
doing
think it's
RLHF.
still AI company. I'll give you why. Because data, if you have collected data, in order to validate that internally, you will still end up training models.
Yeah. I mean, but we feel like the skill of training models is going to be one click. We still do that today. Today, it's still
For, as I mentioned, for POC level, for just validating things, for running pilots, one-click solutions are fine.
absolutely.
Because that's why we have a separate team for auto train within Huggingface. So, and Gradio, who builds these interfaces.
Interesting. Okay, last question. Okay, tough one. What do you think is going to happen to jobs 10 years, 20 years down the line? General, you can go after whichever field you want, but what do you think is going to happen to jobs? Because 10 years is a long time. Now we've started thinking timelines of 2 years, 3 years, right? What happens in 10 years? What happens in 50 years? It's a wild question I try to ask everyone, and everyone gives me a different
10,
answer.
20 years, okay, I can put my mind to stretch. 50 years, I'm not gonna. 10, 20 years, I'll give you my stance. We do not know how artificial intelligence and the derivative systems are gonna get regulated. There's already talks.
You think there's going to be regulation?
There's already talks in the White House and the European syndicates that there probably will be regulations and stuff like that. Leading investors, leading personalities, they are backing it up. Some are not backing it up. But if there's regulation, I think the scenario will be different. If there's no regulation, I think the scenario will be different, and people are going to lose jobs, unfortunately, if there's no regulation.
What percentage of jobs? By the way, I told you this before the podcast. I can never say this publicly now because I'll get thrashed saying that. But I do believe in some version of it.
Yeah, it's a sad reality. It's not like I am not scared. People are going to lose jobs if there's no like regulation, and it's hard to predict a percentage, but we probably will be in the ballpark of 40 to 50%.
So half of all jobs lost.
Yep. So if you are not buckling it up and if you are not identifying the opportunities, probably now it's a good time. Or even start thinking about
I
it.
find that this artificial clock is a great motivator. It's like, you have whatever. In my head, it's not even 10 years. I think it's 2-3 years. Right? We don't know what's going to happen after 2-3 years. So I'm just like, it's uncertain. It's a veil that I can't see through. So I might as well work really, really hard for the next 2-3 years, output as much as I can,
Yeah.
do as much work, run as many companies at the same time. And then I never have to do it again after 2-3 years, hopefully.
Yeah. Because if you work on something that's truly unique, that becomes generally helpful, impactful, and useful for people, that those are probably the product ideas you are trying to chase. For example, I'll give you an example which is probably niche but also useful for a lot of people, for lots of creators. Thumbnail creation, automatic thumbnail creation. Content creation industry will like, dude, come to my home, I'll feed you.
Yeah.
So
We have a tool for it. It's called alphactr.com.
So that sort of stuff. I mean, you can still identify use cases that become impactful within a particular niche, or things that become generally impactful and useful for folks. But you got to start.
So you're saying pick really small niches. But I'll tell you what. I'll tell you the problem with that. Actually, there's no problem with it. But the problem with most computer science engineers graduating out of college, because of the way college in India is structured, that, oh, you're a computer science engineer, then computer science is your domain. But if you look at most successful businesses, they're not, in India I'm talking about, especially consumer business, they're not computer science businesses.
Yeah.
Zomato is a food business.
Yeah.
They use a lot of computer science, but
It's
it's
a
food
tech company, but food.
Yeah, it's food. Like the domain is food. Like people think tech for the domain of tech doesn't work, right? I think you need to pick a specific domain. Like the domain we've picked is content and experiences.
Yeah.
Right? We just want to go. We don't care if it's AI behind the scenes. We don't care if it's humans.
India
behind
is
the
crazy about content and
Yeah, like I mean, the average person spends 5 hours a day on their phone, so it makes sense for us to win that domain. So for us, AI will be below the scenes. We're like, how can we push the boundaries of content with AI? Right? We will use the tools. We will make our own tools.
Yeah, like aiding tools. You will treat AI as an aiding tool.
Yeah, as an aiding tool.
Absolutely.
Right? So the question is, how do engineers get out of the bubble of I'm a computer science person and I need to do some, like, because for them the path immediately becomes, oh, I need to go do machine learning, and they don't think about use cases because computer science itself as a domain is the birthplace of AI. So they're like, I have to do AI in computer science.
Oh yeah, for sure. I think having the awareness
that you need a secondary domain.
Having the awareness of your socio-political conditions can be helpful. Like, okay, there's some food crisis, how can I solve it? There's some crisis in the law system.
There's a problem
How
statement.
can I make things digital? Like fully digital. How can I induce automation into that? How can I make the pension system even better? That sort of stuff.
I'm going to end with this. Give me 5 ideas you would work on with applied AI or at the intersection of ML applied AI if you were not working at Huggingface right now. What's 5 things that maybe kids watching this can just take it and run with?
I'm probably not going to enumerate myself, but let me start. Something that you folks are already working on: personalized content creation, be it in the written form, be it in the audio form, be it in the video form, be it in the image form. First. Second, amazing editing capabilities, but just from natural language description. If I ask you to mellow my image, you should know a basic baseline. You should give me a first draft, and if I ask you to do up the brightness a bit, you should be able to follow that instruction and give me the expected output or something that's closer to the expected output. Third would be amazing video generation and video summarization tools. Like
that's a domain we want to win.
Yeah, so I'll give you an example of what it means to summarize a video, because you can do that in many ways, right? Like I'll give you the example of text summarization. You have a long piece of content. You can either do extractive text summarization, where you pick lines from the existing passage, or you can do abstractive text summarization, where you generate on your own. For video summarization, what would you do? Would you collate timestamps in a spatio-temporal way, and you would
I think you would first convert it to text.
Yeah.
You'd do Whisper, you'd convert it to text.
Yeah.
I mean,
Lots of ways. I mean, lots of ideas and tinkering around how to do that in an efficient and user-friendly manner. So fourth would be amazing operationalization tools for doing generative AI. Like, we do not have good tools that give you logging abilities with large language models, stable diffusions, and whatnot.
I think
They
a
do
lot
not
of
give you caching for free, because
and a lot of UI capabilities also there, right? For example, RLHF. If there was a quick way that I can just have a RLHF UI that a bunch of data people here
that
can
makes
use,
the process intuitive.
makes it quicker. But I don't know if I'd pay for it. I think those would be open source.
Those probably will be open source, but how is Llama Index making their money? They do have a business model. They are doing data augmented. They are giving you tools to do data augmented.
I think
large
Llama Index
language
will
model
also be doing like
applications.
a services layer behind
Yeah,
the
yeah,
scenes,
yeah, yeah.
if I'm not wrong.
Yeah.
What else? Tell me something in the real world that you tackle.
Real world meaning?
Like as in food or something, more.
The final one would be medical image synthesis.
Synthesis or detection? Like
Synthesis, because there's a scarcity of medical data. Like, it's incredibly and notoriously hard for folks to get access to data for obvious reasons, privacy, regulation, and stuff like that. So how do you leverage tools that give you really good quality data, but also at the same time respecting the regulations and the privacy of the patients? So medical image synthesis as a broad domain, like all kinds of images, not just the microscopic ones, but also the diagnosis data.
It's going to be a crazy world. I think we are entering an era where nobody knows what's going to happen in the next 5-10 years, and all we can do is just be absolutely great at our crafts.
Yeah, and at the same time, I think I gave 5 examples from 5 disparate domains: medical, then I touched a bit of software engineering with the caching and operationalization thing. I touched on the creative domain and stuff like that. So I'm also hopeful that folks pick up on one of these and just show me, hey, Sayak, I picked it up.
How do they reach you?
My personal website is the best place, sayak.dev, sayak.dev.
Sayak.dev is where you guys go, and if you build something interesting, please share it with Sayak. And also, I think, thank you for jumping on. I know this has been a hectic conversation. We've touched so many different places. Is there any last message you want to leave to the audience?
Folks that are stuck, because I think I share your concerns. If you are feeling like stuck, you are unable to make progress, and you want to pursue machine learning heavily, just stick to it. You never know which one will be your day, but if you just stick to it without expecting too much, if you stick to it organically, if you stick to it like really in like the old hard working way, I think things will fall in your place.
Interesting. Awesome. Thank you so much. And thank you for allowing me to interview you. And thank you so much for answering the questions. Bye.